Hi guys! So, I hope everyone's having a great day, and today I'm going to be reading chapters 12 and 13 of Tender is the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Alright, so chapter 12. They were at Foysen's waiting for Nicole, 6 of them, Rosemary, the Norths, Dick Diver, and 2 young French musicians. They were looking over the other patrons of the restaurant to see if they had repose. Dick said no American men had any repose, except himself, and they were seeking an example to confront him with. Things looked black for them. Not a man had come into the restaurant for 10 minutes without raising his hand to his face. "We ought never to have given up wax mustaches," said Abe. "Nevertheless, Dick is the only man with repose." "Oh, yes, I am. But he may be the only sober man with repose." A well-dressed American had come in with 2 women who swooped and fluttered unselfconsciously around a table. Suddenly he perceived that he was being watched, whereupon his hand rose spasmodically and arranged a phantom bulge in his necktie. In another unseated party, a man endlessly patted his shaven cheek with his palm, and his companion mechanically raised and lowered the stub of a cold cigar. The luckier ones fingered eyeglasses and facial hair, the unequipped stroked blank mouths, or even pulled desperately at the lobes of their ears. A well-known general came in, and Abe, counting on the man's first year at West Point, that year during which no cadet can resign and from which none can recover, made a bet with Dick of $5. His hands hanging naturally at his sides, the general waited to be seated. Once his arms swung suddenly backward like a jumper's, and Dick said, supposing he lost control, but the general recovered and they breathed again. The agony was nearly over. The garçon was pulling out his chair. With a touch of fury, the conqueror shot up his hand and scratched his gray, immaculate head. "You see," said Dick smugly, "I'm the only one." Rosemary was quite sure of it, and Dick, realizing that he never had a better audience, made the group into so bright a unit that Rosemary felt an impatient disregard for all were not at their table. They had been 2 days in Paris, but actually they were still under the breech umbrella. When, as at the ball of the Corps des Pages the night before, the surroundings seemed formidably to Rosemary, who had yet to attend a Mayfair party in Hollywood. Dick would bring the scene within range by greeting a few people, a sort of selection the Divers seemed to have a large acquaintance. But it was always as if the person had not seen them for a long time, and was utterly bowled over. "Where do you keep yourselves?" And then recreate the unity of his own party by destroying the outsiders softly but permanently with an ironic coup de grace. Presently, Rosemary seemed to have known these people herself in some deplorable past, and then got on them, rejected them, discarded them. Their own party was overwhelming. Their own party was overwhelmingly American and sometimes scarcely American at all. It was themselves he gave back to them, blurred by the compromises of how many years. Into the dark, smoky restaurant, smelling of the rich, raw foods of the buffet, slipped Nicole's sky blue suit like a stray segment of the weather outside. Seeing from their eyes how beautiful she was, she thanked them with a smile of radiant appreciation. They were all very nice people for a while, very courteous and all that. Then they grew tired of it, and they were funny and bitter, and finally they made a lot of plans. They laughed at things that they would not remember clearly afterward, laughed a lot, and the men drank 3 bottles of wine. The trio of women at the table were representative of the enormous flux of American life. Nicole was the granddaughter of a self-made American capitalist and the granddaughter of a count of the house of Leap Wessenfield. Mary North was the daughter of a journeyman paper hanger and a descendant of President Tyler. Rosemary, from the middle of the middle class, catapulted by her mother onto the uncharted heights of Hollywood. Their point of resemblance to each other and their different forms, so many American women, lay in the fact that they were all happy to exist in a man's world. They preserved their individuality through men and not by opposition to them. They would all three have made alternatively good courtesans or good wives, not by the accident of birth, but through the greater accident of finding their man or not finding him. So Rosemary found it a pleasant party, that luncheon, nicer in that there were only 7 people, about the limit of a good party. Perhaps, too, the fact that she was new to their world acted as a sort of catalytic agent to precipitate out of all their old reservations about one another. After the table broke up, a waiter directed Rosemary back into the dark hinterland of all French restaurants, where she looked up at a phone number by a dim orange bulb and called Franco-American Films. Sure, they had a print of Daddy's Girl. It was out for the moment. They would run it off later in the week for her at 341 Rue de Saint-Angus. Ask for Mr. Crowder. The semi-booth gave on by the vestiaire, and as Rosemary hung up the receiver, she heard 2 low voices not 5 feet from her on the other side of a row of coats. "So you love me?" "Oh, do I?" It was Nicole. Rosemary hesitated in the door of the booth, and then she heard Dick say, "I want you terribly. Let's go to the hotel now." Nicole gave a little gasping sigh. For a moment, the words conveyed nothing at all to Rosemary, but the tone did. The vast secretiveness of it vibrated to herself. "I want you. I'll be at the hotel at 4. Rosemary stood breathless as the voices moved away. She was at first even astonished. She had seen them in their relation to each other as people without personal exigencies, as something cooler. Now a strong current of emotion flowed through her, profound and unidentified. She did not know whether she was attracted or repelled, but only that she was deeply moved. It made her feel very alone as she went back into the restaurant, but it was touching to look in upon, and the passionate gratitude of Nicole's "Oh, do I?" echoed in her mind. The particular mood of the passage she had witnessed lay ahead of her. But however far she was from it, her stomach told her it was all right. She had none of the aversion she had felt in the playing of certain love scenes in pictures. Being far away from it, she nevertheless irrevocably participated in it now. And shopping with Nicole, she was much more conscious of this assignation than Nicole herself. She looked at Nicole in a new way, estimating her attractions. Certainly she was the most attractive woman Rosemary had ever met, with her hardness, her devotions and loyalties, and a certain elusiveness, which Rosemary, thinking now through her mother's middle-class mind, associated with her attitude about money. Rosemary spent money she had earned. She was here in Europe due to the fact that she had gone in the pool 6 times that January day, with her temperature roving from 99 in the early morning to 103 when her mother stopped it. With Nicole's help, Rosemary bought 2 dresses and 2 hats and 4 pairs of shoes with her money. Nicole bought from a great list that ran 2 pages and bought the things in the windows besides. Everything she liked that she couldn't possibly use herself, she bought as a present for a friend. She bought colored beads, folding beach cushions, artificial flowers, honey, a guest bag, bags, scarves, lovebirds, miniatures for a dollhouse, and 3 yards of some new cloth the color of prawns. She bought a dozen bathing suits, a rubber alligator, a traveling chess set of golden ivory, big linen handkerchiefs for Abe, 2 chamois leather jackets of kingfisher blue, and burning bush from Harms. Bought all these things not a bit like a high-class courtesan buying underwear and jewels, which were after all professional equipment and insurance, but with an entirely different point of view. Nicole was the product of much ingenuity and toil. For her sake, trains began their run at Chicago, and travelers the round belly of the continent to California. Chicle factories fumed, and link belts grew link by link in factories. Men mixed toothpaste in vast and drew mouthwash out of a copper hogshed. Girls canned tomatoes quickly in August or worked rudely at the 5 and 10s on Christmas Eve. Half-breed Indians toiled on Brazilian coffee plantations, and dreamers were muscled out of patient rights in the new tractors. See, that's what I mean when, sometimes it words stuff a little strange. These were some of the people who gave a tithe to Nicole, and as the whole system swayed and thundered onward, it lent a feverish bloom to such processes of hers as wholesale buying, like the flush of a fireman's face holding his post before a spreading blaze. She illustrated very simple principles containing in herself her own doom, but illustrated them so accurately that there was grace in the procedure, and presently Rosemary would try to imitate it. It was almost 4. Nicole stood in a shop with a lovebird on her shoulder and had one of her infrequent outbursts of speech. Well, what if you hadn't gone in the pool that day? I sometimes wonder about such things. Just before the war, we were in Berlin. I was 13. It was just before Mother died. My sister was going to a court ball, and she had 3 of the royal princes on her dance card, all arranged by a chamberlain and everything. Half an hour before she was going to start, she had a side ache and a high fever. The doctor said it was appendicitis and she ought to be operated on. But Mother had her plans made, so Baby went to the ball and danced till 2 with an ice pack strapped on under her evening dress. She was operated on at 7 o'clock next morning. It was good to be hard then. All nice people were hard on themselves. But it was 4 o'clock and Rosemary kept thinking of Dick waiting for Nicole now at the hotel. She must go there. She must not make him wait for her. She kept thinking, why don't you go? But then suddenly, or let me go if you don't want to. But Nicole went to one more place to buy corsages for them both and sent one to Mary North. Only then she seemed to remember, and with sudden abstractions she signaled for a taxi. Goodbye, said Nicole. We had fun, didn't we? Loads of fun, said Rosemary. It was more difficult than she thought, and her whole self protested as Nicole drove away. Ooh. She wants her man. Alright, chapter 13. Dick turned the corner of the traverse and continued along the trench, walking on the duckboard. He came to a periscope, looked through it a moment, then he got on the step and peered over the parapet. In front of him, beneath a dingy sky, was Beaumont Hamel. To his left, the tragic hill of Thiepval. Dick stared at them through his field glasses, his throat straining with sadness. He went on along the trench and found the others waiting for him in the next traverse. He was full of excitement and he wanted to communicate it to them, to make them understand about this, though actually Abe North had seen battle service and he had not. This land here cost 20 lives afoot that summer, he said to Rosemary. She looked out obediently at the rather bare green plains, with its low green trees of 6 years' growth. If Dick had added that they were now being shelled, she would have believed him that afternoon. Her love had reached a point where now at last she was beginning to be unhappy, to be desperate. She didn't know what to do. She wanted to talk to her mother. There are lots of people dead since we've all been, let me reread that. There are lots of people dead since, and we'll all be dead soon, said Abe consolingly. Rosemary waited tensely for Dick to continue. See that little stream? We could walk to it in 2 minutes. It took the British a month to walk to it, a whole empire walking very slowly, dying in front and pushing forward behind. And another empire walked very slowly backwards a few inches a day, leaving the dead like a million bloody rugs. No European will ever do that again in this generation. Why, they've only just quit over in Turkey, said Abe, and in Morocco. That's different. This Western Front business couldn't be done again, not for a long time. The young men think that they could do it, but they couldn't. They could fight the First Marne again, but not this. This took religion and years of plenty and tremendous sureties and the exact relation that existed between the classes. The Russians and Italians weren't any good in this front. You had to have a whole-souled sentimental equipment going back further than you could remember. You had to remember Christmas, and postcards of the Crown Prince and his fiancée, and little cafes and Valence and beer gardens and the Unter den Linden and weddings at the Mairie and going to the Derby and your grandfather's whiskers. General Grant invented this kind of battle in Petersburg in '65. No, he didn't. He just invented mass butchery. This kind of battle was invented by Lewis Carroll and Jules Verne and whoever wrote Undine, and country deacons bowling and Marines in Marseilles and girls seduced in the back lanes of Württemberg and Westphalia. Why, this was a love battle. There was a century of middle-class love spent here. This was the last love battle. You want to hand over the battle to D.H. Lawrence, said Abe. All my beautiful, lovely, safe world blew itself up here with a great gust of high, explosive love, Dick mourned persistently. Isn't that true, Rosemary? I don't know, she answered with a grave face. You know everything. They dropped behind the others. Suddenly, a shower of earth, gobs, and pebbles came down on them, and Abe yelled from the next traverse. The war spirit's getting into me again. I have 100 years of Ohio love behind me, and I'm going to bomb out this trench. His head popped up over the embankment. You're dead. Don't you know the rules? That was a grenade. Rosemary laughed, and Dick picked up a retaliatory handful of stones and then put them down. I couldn't kid here, he said rather apologetically. The silver cord is cut and the golden bowl is broken and all that, but an old romantic like me can't do anything about it. I'm romantic too. They came out of the neat, restored trench and faced a memorial to the Newfoundland dead. Reading the inscription, Rosemary burst into sudden tears. Like most women, she liked to be told how she should feel, and she liked Dick's telling her which things were ludicrous and which things were sad. But most of all, she wanted him to know how much she loved him, now that the fact was upsetting everything, now that she was walking over the battlefield in a thrilling dream. After they got in their car and started back towards Amiens. A thin, warm rain was falling on the new, scrubby woods and underbrush, and they passed great funeral pyres of sorted duds, shells, bombs, grenades, and equipment. Helmets, bayonets, gun stocks, and rotten leather abandoned 6 years in the ground. And suddenly, around a bend, the white caps of a great sea of graves. Dick asked the chauffeur to stop. There's that girl, and she still has her wreath. They watched as he got out and went over to the girl who stood uncertainly by the gate with a wreath in her hand. Her taxi waited. She was a red-haired girl from Tennessee whom they met on the train this morning, come from Knoxville to lay a memorial on her brother's grave. There were tears of vexation on her face. The War Department must have given me the wrong number, she whimpered. It had another name on it. I've been looking for it since 2 o'clock, and there's so many graves. Then if I were you, I'd just lay it on any grave without looking at the name, Dick advised her. You reckon that's what I ought to do? I think that's what he'd have wanted you to do. It was growing dark and the rain was coming down harder. She left the wreath on the first grave inside the gate and accepted Dick's suggestion that she dismiss her taxicab and ride back to Amiens with them. Rosemary shed tears again when she heard of the mishap. Altogether, it had been a watery day, and she felt that she had learned something, though exactly what it was she did not know. Later she remembered all the hours of the afternoon as happy, one of those uneventful times that seem at the moment only a link between past and future pleasure, but turn out to have been like pleasure itself. Amiens was an echoing purple town, still sad with the war. Some railroad stations were the Gare du Nord and Waterloo Station in London. In the daytime, one is deflated by such towns and the little trolley cars of 20 years ago crossing the great gray cobblestone squares in front of the cathedral, and the very weather seems to have a quality of the past, faded weather like that of old photographs. But after dark, all that is most satisfactory in French life swims back into the picture. The sprightly tarts, the men arguing with 100 voiles in the cafes, the couples drifting head to head toward the satisfactory inexpensiveness of nowhere. Waiting for the train, they sat in a big arcade tall enough to release the smoke and chatter and music upward, and obligingly the orchestra launched into Yes, We Have No Bananas. They clapped because the leader looked so pleased with herself. The Tennessee girl forgot her sorrow and enjoyed herself, even began flirtations of tropical eye-rolling and pawings with Dick and Abe. They teased her gently. Then, leaving infinitesimal sections of Wurtembergers, Prussian Guards, Chaucier Alpines, Manchester Millhands, and Old Etonians to pursue their eternal dissolution under the warm rain, they took the train for Paris. They ate sandwiches of the Mortadelle sausages and Bel Pays cheese made up in the station restaurant, and drank Boholias. Nicole was abstracted, biting her lip restlessly and reading over the guidebook to the battlefield that Dick had brought along. Indeed, he had made a quick study of the whole affair, simplifying it always until it bore a faint resemblance to one of his own parties. Alright, well, that's the end of chapter 13. I hope you enjoyed. So, yeah, Rosemary's falling even more in love, but he also loves his wife, but he's also kind of flirting with her, Rosemary, a little bit. So, see you next time for the next chapters. Bye.